Today I wanted to talk to you about camber protocols and how using Cervatec Plus by Ivoclar Vivadent can improve your patient outcomes. Camber stands for Caries Management by Risk Assessment, meaning that we should be looking at our patients and noting things like active decay, plaque scores, dry mouth, and recent decay, and then placing them into risk categories. Generally, as the patient's risk level rises, so does the number of strep mutans in the mouth. Cervatec Plus is a clear varnish that utilizes chlorhexidine and thymol to deliver long-lasting strep mutans-killing effective treatment. Unlike a chlorhexidine rinse, Cervatec Plus does not stain. It is also beneficial for patients or parents who feel strongly against fluoride applications. If you are working with patients who fall into the moderate to high caries risk, Cervatec Plus is a must. What better benefit can you give your patients than something that is clinically proven to last for up to 3 months? Find out more by visiting their website, ivoclarvivadent.com.
A tale of two hygienists, listeners. My name is Alan Mead. I'm the co-host of the Dental Hacks podcast. I would like to invite you to the Voices of Dentistry. What's the Voices of Dentistry? Well, it's a meeting that focuses on podcasts as well as the social media space that the podcasters have created. Did you realize that Andrew and Michelle have been at every single Voices of Dentistry meeting ever? They've been repping the hygienist from the very beginning. Now this year, we're doing it in Scottsdale again. Check it out at voicesofdentistry.com. We have an incredible speaker lineup. You're going to have a chance to sit down with all your favorite podcasters, including Andrew and Michelle. Maybe sit down and do a podcast with them, something like that. Go check it out, voicesofdentistry.com. We'd love to see you there.
Hey, listeners. This episode that you're about to listen to was so fantastic. And Corey was kind enough to give our listeners an assessment. However, if you are listening to this after Thanksgiving, which is November 28th, that assessment is now closed. Definitely email Corey for her services with Custom Dental Solutions, because you will learn so much about yourself and your teammates and how you practice and what you want out of life. But the assessment for free will be closed after November 28th. But keep listening because you won't be disappointed.
One thing I really wanted the attendees to learn as we presented that course was once you find your why, you will never ask your what. Certain people just really don't mesh or don't connect, and it's okay. And I think that's the biggest thing too, is giving yourself permission and understanding who you are. You're created unique. That's what makes this really exciting. So sometimes we feel that judgment from people, like, really? Now you're doing this? Sure. And you know what? In 5 years, I might do something totally different. And that's okay. And that feels good.
Get ready for your unofficial dental hygiene podcast. These are the tales of two hygienists, one East Coast RDH and one West Coast hygienist. Listen as they tackle the profession of dental hygiene with humor and enthusiasm. Now, please join Michelle Strange and Andrew Johnston as they tell you a tale of two hygienists.
Listeners, welcome to episode 202. Andrew usually does this, so I don't know how to do this. My name is Michelle, and welcome back to the podcast. And I have a guest co-host for the intro and also on the interview. Welcome. You want to say Edie or Eden?
Whichever you prefer.
Oh.
I will answer to both.
To both of them. Edie, Eden, Ivy.
Hey.
And I brought you back on because you and I took this test that Corey gave us. Corey Jameson-Kuehl. Thank you, because I was like, I'm going to say it wrong because now it's in my head because I've always said it wrong and I don't remember how I used to say it. But she was on and she does amazing things with her custom dental solutions. And when I first got this test, I was like, I'm a terrible human. I hate myself. And then I read into it and she explained it and I felt slightly better about life.
Slightly better.
Slightly.
You're just a very motivated person. You're not a bad person.
Well, but can we say what our, that part, others' perception of us, the extreme.
Oh, right. Okay, hold on. I got to find that because that's a good one. What page is that?
That's going to be on page 12.
Okay.
So for podcast listeners, if this is your first episode, we're just recapping essentially what we took with this test, because we've had it for 4 weeks now at least.
Yeah, about that.
So we've kind of chewed it up and learned some things from it. Yeah.
Yes, but able to digest and implement some of the
Things.
knowledge.
Yeah. So perceptions, how others see you in the extreme. People see me as overly confident, a poor listener, and talkative.
And under extreme pressure, stress, or fatigue, others may see me as being abrasive, controlling, and opinionated.
It doesn't settle well with your soul when you read these things.
But like self-perception, I see myself as pioneering, competitive, positive, assertive, confident, and a winner. Just like at this, what you didn't say how your
Mine are
self-perception is.
enthusiastic, charming, persuasive, optimistic, inspiring.
See, I think you're all of those things. I share your self-perception.
Apparently, I haven't been under extreme pressure, stress, or fatigue around you. It was so good, though. But we really did the disc as well. That was one big thing about this. And I am a high ID, and you're a DI, right?
Yep, I'm a high D, high I. Yes.
Yeah. So that's dominance, influencing, steadiness, and compliance. Again, if you read these, like the compliance is like firm, independent, self-willed, and obstinate.
Well, but that's because we're low.
We're low in our
If
compliance.
those who are high on compliance, they're cautious, careful, exacting, systematic. We're both very low.
Very low.
Right.
And steadiness too. We're very low in the steadiness. So it was just really fascinating to learn this. But what I think you and I took away, there's something called time wasters.
Yes.
And the time wasters, I was like, did you follow me around? Like these were so, like when I first looked at them, I was like, this doesn't make sense. And then I actually like read them and I was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
I definitely feel seen.
What's your time waster?
My time wasters are snap decisions. So possible causes might be impatience overrides need to wait for more information, which is definitely true.
Mhm.
But what I love about the time wasters is that it states the time waster, it
Yes.
states the causes, and then it gives you possible solutions.
Right.
So with the time waster, I think that's probably why we both like that so
Yeah,
much.
I think
It's
so.
like we saw things that are eating away at our productivity.
But how do we fix it?
Yes, exactly. We saw why that's happening and how we can implement systems to
not do
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Because I think we both want to be very productive. And so to identify these things, like mine is long lunches, which I was like, I don't know what that even means because like I eat while I'm on a computer, but so essentially gets involved in the excitement of conversations and forgets about time. 100%. I have a podcast, for crying out loud, right? I see long lunches as a networking opportunity. And I was just saying how much I will excuse anything. I'm like, but it's networking. It's networking. But it was, like you said, the good solutions. And then poor filing system. And I would think I'm a okay organizer. But this made sense. So my causes would be like, have not determined or prioritized subject matters. And I think that's very true. Like I get so excited about a lot of different projects that I don't prioritize very well.
Right.
So that was interesting.
Yeah. Another one of mine was firefighting. Like I have the desire to solve problems quickly and sometimes without adequate information. And so because it's exciting and interesting to me and it makes my brain work, like I'd much rather put out a fire than take care of my more long-term projects.
Yeah.
And so one thing that's been really helpful to me is to pause my email, pause my Slack, and so that I can't see the fires. And so, and I do it like in chunks, you know, like an hour, 2 hours. And that has helped me complete some of those projects that have been on my list for forever.
Really?
That I just keep putting off, or it's not even that I put it off. Like I justify, I'm just so busy, but it's because I am constantly putting
all
these
those fires. Yeah.
Which is part of my job as director of customer success. I need to make sure my customers are successful, that if they have a problem, I'm solving it. But pausing my email, like, finding those solutions.
Excuse me, I'm still sick, guys. Because every time you get taken away, it's like 20 minutes to refocus your attention.
Yep. I would say that's very
absolutely accurate. Excessive socializing is my time waster because I enjoy people.
It's why you're so fun. It's why we like you so much.
Thank you. This is where I was like, did you follow me home? Cluttered desk. And I was like, well, this maybe sometimes, but then, so I have this, another podcaster that I listen to is Shailene Johnson, who did like Plyo. Remember the workout tapes, like Plyo, Pilates and yoga? Yeah. She's like the cute, bubbly blonde. Oh, she's like a social media like entrepreneur, like guru too. So she has like this great podcast. And she said in one of her podcasts is that when she is procrastinating, the way she procrastinates is by organizing. And that is so me because I still feel like I'm being productive.
Right. And you're like, it needed to be done.
Yeah,
how much I'm getting done.
Yes. And so I have that, but then I also, I'm going. And then once everything does get like very cluttered, my brain does shut down. Like I can't focus on the next project. Like you said, firefighting, right? I'm just doing all that. And then I organize. Yeah. I see organizing and filing activities as a waste of time, 100%. I want everything at my fingertips. And that's so true. I'm like, but I'll need that. I'll need that. I make like open shelves because if a cabinet door gets in my way, I have no time to open that cabinet door or shut it if it exists. So this makes so much sense. So I was like, this is fantastic. And my last one was desire to be involved with too many people because I have too many interests. It is true.
Yeah. But I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, you can say shit. It's fine.
Okay, that's allowed.
Andrew knows that this should always be explicit because I want it.
Okay. Yeah, there's lots of cool stuff going on.
So what else did you find in yours?
Let's see. Oh, yeah. Crisis management was another one of my time wasters, which I feel like is the same thing as firefighting. Let's see. Or lack of a written plan. I feel like if I don't have a list written out, I'm a mess. I have to. And that's with everything in my life. That is not just work. That is chores around the house, household management stuff, activities for my kids, grocery lists. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Like I have to write a plan if I'm going to really be successful.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, that one, let's see. The areas for improvement I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know that I really want to go into these.
I know those are like real gut, like hit you in the gut. But one thing I will say, I found one of my tendencies and areas for improvement. I think it's interesting because this weekend we are at Do, which is the Dental Entrepreneur Woman magazine, and Ann Duffy's like vision of a retreat, and we're talking about strengths.
What was it? What's the name of it? It starts with a C.
The Clifton
Strengths Assessment.
Yes, exactly. So that's what we did. And so I don't focus on strengths very much. And one of my areas to improve is, it says I have a tendency to be overly enthusiastic about my own shortcomings and weaknesses. I actually, this past weekend, we're always pretty transparent on this podcast. Like I had like a little breakdown and all I could see is all the things I did wrong and I can't do right and I'm not good at. And I knew that this retreat was coming up and I was like, remember your strengths, remember your strengths, remember your strengths. But it's still, I was like, ugh, I have a really hard time.
It's tough. And it has been fun to see, like after doing the Clifton Strengths Assessment and comparing it to this disc, like it's amazing how they parallel. Like, I mean, I won't go into too much into the Clifton Strengths, but a lot of it is like intellectual and gaining knowledge and learning. And that's, my disc, my drivers, because we've talked about the disc, and Corey will go into this in the podcast.
Yes.
And it's amazing because the disc is very informative. but looking at the drivers and what your motivational forces are, I felt like was so interesting. And I feel like that is what really lines up with these potential strengths.
I agree. And so like what that even means, let me find that. Where was that? That the driving forces. So it does tell you a little bit about like understanding your driving forces. And it says you will learn how to explain, clarify, and amplify some of the driving forces in your life. And that's essentially just like, let me find it. Where are you? So intellectual is one, altruistic, selfless, receptive, objective, commanding, collaborative, harmonious, structured, resourceful, intentional, and instinctive. Like you have, and then you score on these things, right? So what was your first 4?
So my first 4, let's see, I was looking at my strengths and weaknesses. So this test is I love this strengths and weaknesses area because it's like, okay, these are areas I'm really strong and these are areas that might need
a little more help.
And then energizers and stressors, like that helped you mitigate some stuff. Like you can put more of that energizing in your life and try and get rid of some of those stressors. Anyway, okay, sorry, that was
no, but that's so true.
A bit off. So mine were intellectual, receptive, collaborative, and altruistic. Those were my top 4. Yours are similar, right?
I was intellectual, altruistic, selfless, and receptive.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Corey brings up on the podcast is that I probably don't do very well when you approach me with numbers in an office. Were you the same way?
I don't remember reading that, but I am that way.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know. You can't give me a production goals.
I would not do well with production goals. If you gave me health-based goals.
Right. Outcomes. Give me health outcomes.
Yeah. But I just it never resonated with me. And once you started talking business to me, that took away from the patient's health.
Yes.
And I know that it doesn't. Like I get it, but I would have to try really hard to get out of my heart and into my head if you start talking to me about production. And so it was fascinating to hear her say, like, if you give a manager this is really going to help you engage your employees and your teams so much better.
Yes.
If you know their drivers, right?
Yes. I was going through this with my boss, which was really funny because we have a great working relationship and he's very...
and you've heard Brant from Mouthwash.
Yes, Brant from Mouthwash. He's super supportive of me and always trying to help me grow and learn and be successful. So it was really fun to go through this with him and to see his reaction to some of like my strengths and weaknesses, because I can be a bit obstinate and I can argue for the sake of arguing. And he's reading these and he's laughing. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, that doesn't sound like you at all. Yeah. So, but it does like give these tips on how to approach a person. And it's the same thing with this strengths thing. When you know what somebody's good at, when you know what motivates them, it's so much easier to work with them and get them to achieve the goals that you want.
Exactly. Have you ever done Myers-Briggs?
I have.
Yeah, that's also...
I think I'm an INFJ, perhaps. Have you done Enneagram?
I haven't done that one yet. I should do that too.
Yeah, you need to.
I am an ETSJ. So extrovert, thinker, I can't remember all of them. But what I like about Myers-Briggs is they have a flip chart.
Okay.
Have you seen that flip chart?
I have not seen it.
So if you are
INFJ, I think.
And I flip it to yours and I flip it to mine, and it gives these like, here's where you're going to struggle. This is where they're going to struggle. This is where you're going to struggle with them, and they're going to struggle with you. And so even at like meetings, I did this at Tepe, and we would have like if I'm going in there and I have to have a meeting, I know who I'm about to walk in and talk to, and me being aggressive and like confrontational as I can be, that's going to shut down an eye, right?
Yeah.
And so I have to like be, aware of that.
That's so smart.
Yeah, I thought it was a good little thing to have.
I feel like it gives you a little edge.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you know how somebody
operates, the power, right? You keep that power a little bit.
Yeah, well, and it's like not even keeping the power, but like if you are aware of how this person communicates and how they're going to perceive things.
True. Yeah.
Like, I think that's probably why Corey does this in her consulting is to show teams how to work together and managers how to better manage their teams.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it does. I think it gives you, and as well, I mean, and really people skills in general and emotional intelligence gives you an edge because if you're, especially in leadership roles, in management and that type of thing.
100%.
I think we should talk about really quickly how we scored our partners and how our partners' discs compared to our own discs, because I found this very interesting. I will say that my partner, I would have never in a million years said that we were opposites. I would have said we're very much alike, but when you look at our discs, it's a mirror. It's the exact opposite. I'm high D, high I. He's low D, low I, high S, high C. And like, that was just mind blowing to me, but it made more sense. I know, but it made more sense than when we looked at the drivers because we're motivated by the same things.
Yes.
So that made perfect sense that we have similar values, similar motivation, but we go about things differently. So that actually makes this a very good team. And I know that.
Yeah. So I'm probably going to make a lot of people take this test because, and like analyze their stuff. And the great thing you'll hear from Corey in this is that she's going to let us all, like anybody who's listening to the podcast can take this.
The whole test, not just like a condensed version, but the
whole
it takes,
thing.
I mean, it's a time commitment. It takes 30, 45 minutes.
Like 30 to 45 minutes seemed like nothing for what we just got.
Agreed.
It's like 60 pages here.
Yes. Yeah. And it's so much. The initial time commitment was nothing compared to like going through and reading and trying to process and digest all the information.
Truly. So, but you got to sit down, you got to like take a moment and like really open up to it and be honest with this.
Yes.
So, I mean, I still kind of like pull this out and like chew it up a little bit, and it's just been very eye-opening, I must say. And I thank you, Corey, so much for coming on and doing this, because I wish I had done this a while ago. And it's funny because she was like, I bet I know what your D and I, like, I was like, oh, yeah. It's funny how she can pick those people out.
It was interesting how she was like, oh yeah, I bet I could have guessed that. And it was funny how she related that then back to our career decisions and what we were doing professionally and how it really lined up with what we were doing. And I mean, how wonderful would it have been to have that 10 years ago?
Yes. Seriously.
Yeah.
Well, we are really thankful for you, Corey. And any final words?
No, I think I've said plenty.
But this was great. And I hope you listeners take advantage of it. I hope you listen to Corey and listen how she breaks it down, and then kind of just take it and go hire her. Go hire Custom Dental Solutions, because I can't even imagine what they do for an office. And let us know how it went. Tag us when you're taking the test or something.
Let us know your disc.
Yeah, that'd be cool. All right, guys. Enjoy this episode with Corey Jameson-Kuehl.
Yes. Hey, Michelle.
Yeah.
It's time for the interview.
Oh, but I had something else to say.
We need to let the experts talk now.
Fine. All right. So this is going to be a fun, different interview. I'm personally a little devastated by my results, so I'm hoping that I leave you with a different perspective. But I want to first introduce my co-host that is not Andrew, Eden Ivy. She is with Mouthwash. You've heard her as a guest before, and now she's stepping into this co-host role. Welcome, Edie.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here.
And then our guest and our teacher for this next hour or so is Corey Jameson-Kuehl, right? Did I say that right? Cool?
Kuehl. Yes, Kuehl.
See, and I jack up names left and right, so I'm sorry about that.
You're fine.
I've been saying your name wrong for 2 years, Corey.
That's okay. It's Jameson-Kuehl, and it's not a big worry. I'm not worried about it at all. So as long as people know the first name, they're usually pretty good on the last name.
Right. Well, welcome, both of you. And Corey, you are just back from the Indigo conference where you gave a really cool course. And tell us about that, and because it kind of feeds into what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. So on Friday of this week, we had hosted our Indigo conference in the state of Wisconsin, which was outstanding as usual. We're so lucky to have amazing chairmen and people that put that together, and Debbie Schumacher and her crew of amazing volunteers. And so I spoke on Friday morning in the course called Finding Your Why. And kind of the purpose of that course is to get real with who you are, because so often we feel discouraged within our dental hygiene career and people start looking for other options. And sometimes those options are still not the right solution. And so one thing I really wanted the attendees to learn as we presented that course was, once you find your why, you will never ask your what. And what that simply means is, when you understand what drives you, you'll know where you're supposed to work. You'll know what relationship you should be a part of, whether it's a personal or a professional relationship. And it just really makes things so much easier in life. So I was really excited. I had students in my class, and I had been asked previous, do you think it's okay if the students join you? And I was like, oh my gosh, students are amazing, because if they can understand this concept now, this will save them so much grief in their life. And I think back to my personal and professional life, if I would have understood my personality and my why, I would have saved myself so many years of things I shouldn't have been doing, or people maybe I shouldn't have been involved in a relationship with, or I wouldn't have been so disappointed in not getting a job or the homecoming date or whatever, because, certain people just really don't mesh or don't connect, and it's okay. And I think that's the biggest thing too, is giving yourself permission and understanding who you are. You're created unique. That's what makes this really exciting.
So we are going, this month that have this segment in is kind of about the non-clinical side of dentistry and dental hygiene. We're talking business. And this is more of, like you said, the relationships and how do we work together. And so you gave us, me and Edie, this assessment. Is that right? We're calling it an assessment?
Yes, we call it an assessment.
And what is it? Because I know I've taken Myers-Briggs, I've taken DISC. So how does this fall into all the different types of assessments, and like, what are we actually looking at here?
Sure. So if you take an assessment through me, you're taking a general DISC along with what's called a driving forces. So I've dabbled in personality assessments for many years, Colby, Cultural Index, Myers-Briggs, DISC itself as well. And it seems like DISC is the most popular. People are more familiar with it. A lot of places take it in their hiring process and pre-hire process, so people are more familiar with it. And that's really awesome. The DISC shows your how. So that would be more of like your pace and how you like to communicate, how you like to work. And so that is a really valuable tool in a pre-hiring situation, or if you're learning to try to mesh a team together in the dental practice. So for me, though, what really ups the game is adding these things called driving forces to the mix. And what that does, and the sciences show that we're driven by different things. And so they break it into 12 categories, and it's, you have 4 primary drivers, things that really light your fire, really start your boat. That is, really driving you to what you want. Then the next set of 4 is your situational. And that's something you may feel, one day I feel more structured. The next day I feel like, it depends on the situation. Maybe I feel a little bit more open-minded and I don't need the routine. And then the last 4 is what we actually call a bias, where we absolutely don't even think along those lines. It's not something that we think of naturally. And so it's really cool to kind of piece those down and break those apart. And that's where for me, in my experience, where the learning has really been amazing when I'm working with dental teams. And just even in my own personal life, understanding what drives somebody really, really makes the lifestyle just amazing, because it makes so much more sense.
I think Edie asked a really good question before this is there some very distinct personality types, right? Edie, like, this is a typical hygienist a type, an assistant, dentist, front desk, office manager. I shouldn't say front desk, they're not furniture. I'm trying to learn new words, but
yes. Oh, yes. So I guess just in the way of background, being the owner of Custom Dental Solutions, we do a lot of personality assessments with our offices. In fact, we do them with all of our clients. We do this in the way of team building and pre-hire and so forth. And so a lot of the information that I have now is more just my experience as far as maybe what specific personality traits I see within different professions in the office. And so I think probably to get into that, we would really need to explain what the DISC stands for first and kind of some traits revolving around that. So we can just jump right into that. So if anyone's ever taken the DISC in the past, maybe they've heard some of these terms. And if they haven't taken the DISC, they can certainly learn from this information as well. So when you take an assessment, it gives you back information in percentages. So if we look at the DISC, the D stands for your dominance, and that's the red colored one. If you guys are following along, it's the red colored line. And basically what we see is that's how you approach challenges and tasks. So we measure this again in percentages. So anything over 50% shows more of a stronger intensity towards that behavior being more observable. So for instance, if we look at our first one at the D, at the dominance, we have something over 50%. That means that person's going to be quicker paced. They're going to expect things done a little faster. They are going to approach a task. They don't have a problem approaching conflicts, or they may be a little more aggressive and they may be a little more abrasive towards things, depending again on that percentage. So if we take an example that everybody knows, if we look at our president, Donald Trump, his DISC assessment is he's a 100% D. So that's a very intense drive. So what do you hear from his mouth? We will build the wall. It will happen now. That's a good example of somebody who's so intense with their D trait. And then, somebody who would have a lower D, maybe at a 4% or below that 50% line, they may not be they're not going to be as direct. They're not going to be as fast paced. They're not going to be as demanding, some of those types of qualities. And this is not a bad trait by any means. These types of people get things done. This is a great quality to have. I really like personally to work with people that have a stronger D in their personality, because I know I can be direct with them. I don't have to sugarcoat anything. I'm not going to hurt their feelings. This is how it goes. So if we look at the both of you have D's over the 50% line. Right. And so we see that, but that means, again, that's a quality where you're able to approach people and tasks in a very specific, direct manner. Now, the next one, the I is your influence. That's the yellow one, the yellow color in the disc. And that is how you approach people. That's more of a people trait. And again, same as with the D, if it's over that 50% mark, that is a stronger intensity for you. So we see people that have higher I's, and sometimes we refer to it that way. So if you're above that 50% mark, that energy line, we call it a high I or a low I if you're below the energy line. And we use that with any of the terms, high D, low D, high I, low I. So, Michelle, your I is at, your natural is at 75%. So you really love people. That's a high people quality. Eden, the same. You're at 78%. You guys are people. You love people. And so that's a really great quality. So somebody that would have like a 48% in their I would not be as much of an extrovert. Maybe somebody who doesn't enjoy people. The higher the I, and I see this is to answer Eden's question too. This is something that almost every clinical hygienist has a high I. Everybody, hands down. So if I wanted to stereotype, now we're always a blend of everything, but most commonly I see the hygienist as somebody who has an intense I, even if they're blended with a D or blended with an S or something like that. A clinical hygienist almost always has a high I. In fact, yesterday, or Friday rather, in the course, it's interactive, and I would say, raise your hand if you have an I above the energy line. And there's like everyone in the entire class, with the exception of like one person, raises their hand. And so I think we look at that in the hygiene perspective, and it's like, okay, why are you attracted to the profession of dental hygiene? Number one reason, you get to help people. So that's one quality that we see in the I, and I see that a lot in the practices. That's one thing we also want to see in our administrative area. Patient concierge, people answering the telephones, people making the appointments, serving people. We would like to see that trait, that higher I, as a big part of their personality. So that's another one that we need to see. And sometimes even in a dental assistant too, you want to see that, because that higher I, the more customer focused that person is usually going to be, a little more people focused. Now, you guys can appreciate this and probably can admit it as well. So I'm a higher I also like that. The higher the I, sometimes the more scattered we get, because we are all over the place. High I's are really happy people. They're very positive people. So like today, I'm sitting in my kitchen in Wisconsin and the sky's a little gray. And even just before we went on, I said to my husband, I was like, look at the sun is coming through. Oh, that's awesome. And I'm going on and on about the sun coming through, because that's how high I's are. We like to see the positives, and it's very natural for us to see the positives and things. So people that are lower I's don't always really like us, to be quite honest. They don't. They may find us a little too chatty, a little bit too annoying, and get to the point, ladies. Like, why are you talking so much? And that's kind of a quality that we see in the higher I's. So then next would be our S, and that's our steady. And steady is the green in the disc. And that is people who are very, maybe more moderately paced. This is also a people trait. This is also these people are really good listeners. So they're very loyal. They're very steady Eddie is kind of, the term I like to use for them. Security is a really strong feeling that they need to have. So as I noticed with the two of you, both of your S's are below the energy line. So you may wonder, well, what does that mean? I'm a lower S. So that means that you enjoy change. You enjoy frequent change. And you may need to work on your listening maybe a little bit better. I know, I'm there too. So, but think about somebody whose S is above the 50% mark. They're going to be slower pace. They're going to be a little more methodical. They're going to be more interested in maybe not taking a risk either. They're going to take a little bit more chance to process something. So we see this a lot in our hygienists. So the most common blend I see within dental hygienists is an SI. And what that means is a very methodical yet people person type of personality. That's why you see hygienists, say, well, they get very upset if they don't have 90 minutes for an SRP, or, that's where you start to see that quality kind of come out, because, well, no, I can't change what I've been doing for, 15 years. That's not going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
And so, that's not best for my patient. You'll hear those qualities, and I can usually identify without an assessment and say, yep, they're going to be an SI or an IS, whichever one. So then fourthly, that C is our compliance. That's the blue on the disc. It's more of an analytical trait. So it shows how we feel sometimes about the rules, for instance. Those types of people that have higher C's. I know you're at 8. That means that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing.
I'm just looking at the words on this, and I'm in that obstinate category. Wow.
Right. And again, these words that are on your assessments, they're general terms. It doesn't necessarily always mean that is exactly who you are. But as a whole, this is what it says naturally, how somebody is going to behave under pressure or not under pressure. Or this is how they're going to prefer. So our C's that have high C's above the energy line, those are like someone to think about as like an accountant. Somebody who's going to be very analytical. So who do you guys think, if they're very analytical, who do you think in the dental practice would have a higher C personality?
The dentist.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And truthfully, that's what you want. So if we're going to have some work done in our mouths, if we're going to have this implant done and a beautiful crown placed, I want a high C personality dentist doing my work. So if you look at these different, and I know we just did this kind of in a nutshell, but if you look at the DISC, and again, we're all blends of all 4, just some are more intense in our personalities than others. Just like both of you are DIs, that would be your style, or Michelle, you're an ID actually. Your I is a little higher than your D. So that's your natural style. It doesn't mean at times you aren't analytical or you don't appreciate a more steady pace. It doesn't mean that as a whole. It just means that you're more intense on those other drives than on those specific characteristics as a whole. So a lot of times in our offices, though, we see our dentists are high C's, they're high S's. And so one thing do we hear that we find a lot of complaints about is how long it takes for a doctor to make a decision. Do you guys ever hear that? And I can tell you, how long does it, so as DIs, how long does it take you guys to make a decision?
Not very long.
4 seconds.
Exactly. And so do you see how that can be a conflict in the practice?
Yeah.
That's just an example of interpersonal relationships. So if you understand your dentist is a high C, high S, he's going to be slower paced or she's going to be slower paced. That means they're going to process before they decide to let you buy all these new instruments.
That's exactly what I was thinking, Corey. Like, oh, I want that air powder polisher. I need it. And the dentist is like, wait, I need all of the information. And I'm going to have to think about it for like 6 weeks before I'm ready.
Yes, exactly.
And I'm like, but I need it now, like right now.
Exactly. Perfect example. And it's so true because we're ready for this now. When you have that strong intensity towards I'm going to approach this task with a challenge. I'm impulsive. I want this now. And yet you still have that people tendency. So it's going to benefit your patient there. But you're right. They want all the background. They want to know, how much does this cost? What are the benefits? Why would we do this? Are you going to use it? All these different questions. And so we do see naturally a lot of times our doctors that have the higher C personality, they match very well with a DI dental hygienist.
Interesting.
And they kind of let that whole office flow. But then at times, it can be frustrating too, because then if we're not communicating appropriately and we have one person just taking over everything, that's not positive for other people too. Another conflict that we see a lot of too is between like a DI and an S. So in the Friday class, we had 2 hygienists that were really high S's. They were both at 90%. This is a very strong trait for them. And they had mentioned they had just brought on a new grad and they didn't think, she wasn't there, but they didn't think her personality was like theirs. She was far more fast paced. And I found it interesting that they came to the conference together, but they didn't bring her with, she wasn't worthy to come because, they don't like her. High S, it's like, we got to check you out for a while. We need to process you. We need to make sure you're okay. Whereas people that are high I's, we're best friends in 2.5 seconds, so that's another different quality too. So hopefully this young grad will make it with these 2 high S's. And they were very open in the class and I think we'll go back and adapt a little bit because that's the whole key, right? We all need to adapt with who we're working with. And so they were very much upset because they were trying to change some standards in the practice as far as how long you get for certain procedures. And as a high S, meaning very intense, almost to 100%, change is really hard for them, very hard for them. Whereas, let's look at, you guys both have below the S, below the energy line. I'm below the energy line too. We welcome change. Like, oh, great, there's a new system to bring to the practice. Let's do it. If we're going to change the time frame on this, if we're going to work, on the quarter hour instead of the hour, that's cool. Let's do that. That's natural for us to be that way. But for somebody who's a high S personality, that's very challenging for them. That's not comfortable for them. They need time to process and really, really analyze if that's going to be something they can do. So bringing just the disc itself into the workplace is a huge game changer for just understanding the how of how somebody would prefer communication, how they prefer to work. And it's so important when you're looking for a job or if you're in that environment already, if it's something that stresses you out so much, I'm sure if you looked at some of these different qualities, you'd understand why. It's because they're different. And then it's up to you, because nobody adapts to you. We all have to adapt to others, to either accept that and adapt or find a different position and find something else. And then that's when people say, but I don't understand what I should do. I don't know what drives me. I don't know my why. And that's why we have the driving forces then. So we don't not only have the DISC, but then we have what drives you. And that's why when you took your assessments, you're like, man, this is kind of a souped up assessment here. And it is. It takes the science to another level of what drives that person. And this is why, again, if I would have had this so many years ago, it would have made so much sense. I never would have felt guilty for being the person that I was created to be, or feel guilty like, you've owned 3 businesses, Corey. Like, what's wrong with you? You can't stick with the same thing for 50 years. There's nothing wrong with that. I enjoy change. I'm motivated by different things. I am proud that I've owned 3 businesses that I've been able to sell. It's not like they folded and I wasn't successful. I've moved on to other things. So sometimes we feel that judgment from people like, really? Now you're doing this? Sure. And you know what? In 5 years, I might do something totally different. And that's okay. And that feels good. I don't have to explain to anybody my why. You can see my why. And, you know, that's freedom. That's so much freedom in our personal and career life when we understand that why. And then you don't have to feel judgment from anyone at all. So do we want to go into the driving forces and look and see what drives the both of you and kind of explain what that all means?
Yes. Because I am just like looking at these. I need to understand and make sure that I'm not a sociopath egomaniac.
You're not a sociopath egomaniac. No. And again, that's with understanding who you are is why you do what you do. Look at what you're doing now. You're outside the box. Both of you are outside the box of what a clinical dental hygienist is doing. And you're probably very fulfilled in doing that. And that's, again, where you give yourselves permission to do something out of the norm or out of what your training specifically was in the beginning. We're people. We're continually evolving. We're continually changing. So why should anybody have the right to feel insecure or inadequate or I don't think this looks bad? Nothing's bad. We're continually evolving. So if we look at the driving forces, they are measured in 6 different categories with 2 on each side. So the first one is instinctive versus intellectual. And that's a horizontal line if you're looking at a graph or if anyone looks at these in the future, because we are going to let your listeners take this assessment at no charge. Awesome. So if they prefer to do that, they can contact me. Thanks, I know Corey. We are super, hey, you know what? These are our people. And when you're with your colleagues, whatever we can do to help is what we're going to do. So if they take their assessment and they want to come back and listen to this podcast, then they'll understand. So if we end up doing that and people choose to do that, I want them to understand what they're looking at. So that first driving force is a maroon colored horizontal line. And we have 2 different words there, instinctive versus intellectual. And intellectual was the top drive for both of you, my friends, and it doesn't surprise me at all because of what you're doing. So intellectual is people who love to learn for the sake of learning. There doesn't necessarily have to be a specific purpose to it, but it's just such an interest and a thirst for education, for learning. I always give the example of going to a dental conference with this dentist, and she was high intellectual, and she could see down the hallway there was a beekeepers association going on. And I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt before we were done. And you guys are laughing because you guys are right there with her.
Definitely do. I know where they're going.
Yep, you're going to go down to the Beekeepers Association because you just want to know what's going on. Right, what's going on down there?
Yeah, like I don't know anything about that. I need to know more.
I should know about bees.
Right. And so I could see what she was doing. I could see her kind of looking down the hall and kind of going. And I thought, I'm going to wait for it. I want to see what she's going to say. And then she's like, do you like honey? And I just looked at her and I said, Doctor, I know what you want to do right now. And there's no judgment at all that you don't want to take your dental classes and that you want to go down there and you want to learn about the bees. She goes, I just think it'd be fascinating, don't you? And I said, of course, let's go. And so it's something that, again, It's so strong for certain people. And both of you, this is your top drive. Both of you, it was your top drive. Eden, you were at 96%. Michelle, you're at 93%. That is really significant. So that means on the flip side, instinctive is somebody who needs to learn for a specific purpose. You need a specific reason to learn. So like those are the hygienists that are going just to complete their CEs for the year. That's a good example. So you guys don't understand that group of people at all. In fact, you would have a bias or a non-understanding towards that because you're so intellectual and you love learning so much.
We can't understand why you won't do that.
Absolutely. You don't understand why somebody wouldn't take more CE, or why are you only taking the bare minimum requirements? So that's a super strong drive. So do you understand, like, when somebody has such a strong drive and intellectual, and we see a lot of this in dentistry, a lot of my doctors have this too, which is great, which is why we have such a robust CE culture within dentistry in specifics, because people do love to learn for the sake of learning and they want to be perceived as an expert. That's the other thing I have found with people with a really strong intellectual drive. They want to be perceived as an expert. And that's a good thing. We need people that are experts. So for me, I'm kind of situational. I'm kind of 50-50 on this drive myself. And so I do rely upon a lot of previous experience in being instinctive as a learner. But then, intellectual too. I enjoy learning something new. I took a class on Friday after I was done presenting and on some new methods for anesthesia, and I don't even practice clinically anymore. So it was just like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And I learned a few things that was kind of cool. So again, we have a scale with our driving forces of how something is so intense for us on a 0 to 100, with 50% kind of being that mark again. So again, those four primary drivers would be something like the numbers the two of you have, and that those 90s, that is so strong. That motivates you to keep going in your work environment. And at 96 for Eden and 93 for Michelle, those are huge drives for you guys. So if you're not fed that, you're not happy people. So if people aren't utilizing their drivers and they're not continually being nourished from them, they're miserable people. And we all know people like that, either professionally or in our personal life. And it's like, dude or chick, lady, friend, whoever, go do what drives you. I promise you'll be so fulfilled. So next, we have selfless versus resourceful. That's the horizontal line that's yellow. If you're following along, or if you choose to follow along later to our audience, selfless is people that do a task for the sake of accomplishing a task. On the other side, resourceful is somebody who is constantly thinking about the ROI, the bottom line. This is something that is very, efficient driven. Eden, this wasn't in your top 4. This was more of a situation for you. It depends on what situation you're in to see if it's ROI or if you're just going to complete the task. Michelle, though, 81% selfless, which was really interesting to me. Again, as hygienists, these qualities don't surprise me at all. So selfless, you would do something for the sake of doing without expecting financial gain or something in return, as far as, well, if I spend this particular amount of time on this, how much money am I going to get out of it? That probably isn't your first instinct. Is that correct, Michelle?
Oh, and I'm actually get yelled at a lot about that.
Yes.
How much time are you spending on this? Like, you're not making the money that you need to make on this. I'm like, I don't care.
Exactly. And that at 81%, that's a primary for you. And so whomever is giving you that information, they need to understand that you're simply you don't think that way. It's not that you're trying to not be a good person in their eyes by being efficient or finding an ROI. That's just not how you're made up to be. And so they should lay off. I guess is the bottom line, because we're all different, right? Some people are more selfless, some people are more resourceful, and it's not, again, nothing is good or bad. It's just what drives somebody. And so if somebody would force you to be more resourceful, that would make you very unhappy. So if every day you had to keep a sheet of your ROI for the day, I don't know how long it would take you to finally break and be like, enough, I can't do this.
That is so interesting, because so today I'm podcasting with multiple people,
And this would be my second one. The one I just did before that everybody's going to hear before this week's episode is with Josie Sewell. And she was talking about benchmarks and how she asked her hygienist each week to determine where they fall on their benchmark. And I was like, that would stress me out so badly.
Yes. Great example, Michelle. This is exactly what I'm talking about when we go into these practices and we see these things in place. And I love what consultants like to do. And I love all these different benchmarks and different qualities in that way. But if you understand that that's not what's going to drive that person, it'll be a tremendous source of stress. And stress to me is never something you want to continue to adapt to. A lot of people speak about, getting out of your comfort zone. And there is some validity to that. But I'm also of the opinion, just from looking at the science and just dealing with people every day in private practice dental offices, trying to make them feel supported and help them grow in their careers, is the more we adapt out of who we're created to be, the more stress that creates. That is not comfort zone. That is unhappiness. That is stress. So to your point, Michelle, if somebody's being benchmarked to produce, $1,500 a day as a dental hygienist, and they're high selfless, especially high altruism too, those two combined, that is not the right practice for them. Okay. So that would be something I would recommend for people, and we can get more into that too when we get into the drive between altruism and intentional, which is another one we see really high in dentistry. But I'm getting a slight bit ahead of myself because the third one is purple. It's objective versus harmonious. And neither one of you had that as a primary for yourself. Objective are people who can work really well under chaos. They enjoy chaos. They don't have to have a strong, balanced environment. On the flip side, then those harmonious people are very, very much at peace. They're very, like I always think of yoga, and I think they're kind of granola people. Like they have to feel the need to be balanced in their surroundings. The thing about people that are high harmonious, I notice this with my doctors. If they don't feel good in the space, they don't feel happy at work. And as corny as that sounds, sometimes this is a lot of problem in a practice. So if someone is not happy in their space, their operatory, their treatment room, whatever you want to call it, might be the problem. So I worked with a hygienist who was miserable in her environment because she worked in a treatment room the size of a janitor's closet and had no window, and it was just miserable. She just hated it. Well, she was so high in her harmonious drive that she didn't feel comfortable in the space. So we moved her out of the janitor's closet, put in a high objective hygienist in the janitor's closet, and it was fine. So something as simple as changing spaces for somebody who has a high drive in harmonious is so key to an office culture. And so the last time I checked with them, things were going well. She actually put a bird feeder outside her window, and she can watch the squirrels and the birds and all these things, and that makes her feel comfortable in the space. Whereas our high objective hygienist has no problem running around like a chicken with her head cut off, seeing people in the janitor's closet, which we fondly call it. Of course, it's not a real janitor's closet, but you understand the point though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of the space. So, that's an interesting one. The next one is intentional versus altruism. And Michelle, altruism was in your top 4, and Eden, it was in your top 4 too, actually. So that's why this was really cool to do this with the both of you today, because there's a lot of similar drives with the two of you, and that's really fun. So Michelle, yours was at 81%. Eden, yours was at 54%. So we see this a lot in dentistry. Altruism is somebody who does something without expecting anything in return. So I often say then the flip side of that is highly intentional. And we speak like we want to do everything with intention. We want it to be purposeful. But for those who are strongly altruistic, that's not natural for them to think, I need to do this intentionally. So I would say for Michelle, with having a 6 as an intentional, altruism is such a strong vibe for you that you would have to put quite a bit of effort into doing something very, very purposeful. Let me give you an example so it makes more sense. So let's use dental hygiene, of course, as our example. If you were working with patient care you would truly enjoy serving the patient you were with, regardless of what environment they were in, regardless of their status. If they were a homeless person, if they were a person that had a lot of wealth, if it doesn't really matter. You would just give to serve them. And sometimes our highly altruistic hygienists really thrive very well in community health. They thrive very well there because they love to serve anyone that they can help, because they don't need that ROI for themselves. They don't need that feeling of, I need something in return. So our highly intentional people would be more suited for like a cosmetic practice where they're maybe pitching some strong treatment plans. And they don't feel any guilt because they're pitching this strong treatment plan. So I actually worked with a hygienist who was strongly intentional, and she was working in community health, and she was miserable. And when we kind of peeled it back, I said, what do you want to do that makes so much sense for you? And she said, well, I really would like to sell treatment. I love cosmetic dentistry. I love to do whitening. I love all these heavy cases. She said, but I really feel like, because I was in a space where she was an underserved person. She grew up as an underserved person, had her college paid for. She felt she was supposed to give back by going into community health. And she was miserable in community health. And so it was like, look, I'm going to give you permission to say, look, altruism is not a strong suit for you. Leave community health, go work in a highly intentional practice where you're selling treatment. Go do it. And I guarantee you, you will be happy. I guarantee you. And she's like, well, I just don't know, and she had some concerns because she felt that she was not like physically suitable for a high-end practice and so forth. And I continue to follow up with her, and she has not made the change, and she is miserable in community health. So the point is find where, if that's such a strong drive for you, then be where you need to be. Don't keep working outside of that drive just because you feel like, well, someone gave to me, I should probably give back. No, if that's not naturally how you feel, then go into the environment that works for you. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah, very much so. And both Edie and I work in community health, so I think and have done mission work, and yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's that's in your top 4 for both of you. So that's a strong drive for both of you. Next, we have collaborative versus commanding. That's the black horizontal line. And Edie, you had collaborative as 57%. So that was in your top 4. And Michelle, that was situational for you. That was it kind of goes either way. So what that simply means is collaborative people just love to be a part of the team. They absolutely don't necessarily need any spotlight. They don't need to be the person in charge necessarily. On the flip side, those who have stronger commanding in their drives, they need to be the team leader. Again, depending on the intensity, they need to be in charge. They like the status. They like the recognition. I found this interesting because just knowing Eden, just professionally, just hanging out with her on a couple social occasions, I totally see this, a valuable part of the team, and definitely very collaborative, which is a really cool trait to have in your top 4. And with Michelle, yours being situational, that simply means if you need to be the leader, you can step up and do it. You're capable, like, I can do this. You're not necessarily going out of your way to seek the spotlight necessarily. And collaboratively, obviously that's situational. You can be a part of the team or you could be the leader. So that was cool to see that in both of you too.
That makes complete sense.
One thing I can attribute that to in the work environment too, before we move on to the last one, would be somebody that has a very strong commanding. These are people that are either very, very difficult to work with or need to be surrounded by highly collaborative people that don't care that these people are being as strong as they are. So I have an office right now that I'm working with. It's a very large practice, and the lead dental hygienist's command is at 93%. She has 0 collaborative. And so we're literally hiring hygienists around her. Seriously, hygienists around her that are highly collaborative, because if you are somebody that needs to be the leader and you go into her office and she's at 93% command, you are not going to ever be the leader. She will never let you be the leader. And she's very valuable to the doctor, to the practice. But then what kind of hygienist am I going to find to be on her team? people who don't need to be in the spot like she does. And that works really, really, really well because collaborative people aren't offended by a high command. They don't care. They just, they're part of the team.
It's really interesting, Corey, because I have worked with plenty of demanding hygienists and I never have a problem with them. And
that's interesting.
So many other hygienists are like, I cannot work with her. I don't know how you deal it. And I'm just like, I just let her be the boss of her own little world and I'm the boss of my little world and we're okay. It's fine.
Right. And being collaborative for you, even though it's 57%, it's not like you're 100% collaborative, that's super intense, but that's still strong for you. You don't really care. Whereas, like you said, other hygienists might care and be like, I can't believe she thinks that she's the lead. She's never been told she's the lead. Why is she acting like the lead and eating?
Oh my gosh. You're pretty much reading a Facebook forum right now. Right?
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
You guys, I can't even read the Facebook forums because I just want to scream to all of them. I know. I want to scream to them. You guys, do you know who you're working with? Like, why do you feel shock over anything? Once you know what drives somebody and how they like to communicate, why are you shocked? Seriously.
Yeah.
It's really pretty easy. So don't sit there and say, well, I can't believe this.
Yes. Now you can just send them to this episode so that they
Absolutely. And because I love our colleagues so much and being able to offer them the assessment at no charge is something that they would be really silly to not take advantage of, because even if no one else in their practice does it, learning about yourself and learning more about you is the game changer. I mean, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds before I finish our last driving force, but the last one is the gray horizontal line, receptive versus structured. And this was really strong for both of you guys too. Michelle, your receptive's at 79% and Eden, yours is at 94.
Oh,
so that is so cool. So structured is just exactly what it sounds like. People who, words that work with structured, proven methods, traditional, we've always done it this way, those kinds of mentalities. And then just like the two of you, then that high receptive are people who are creatives. They're outside the box thinkers. They want to look for a new way. They're really open-minded to new things. So I think it's cool with what both of you guys have chosen in your professions. It's pretty obvious. You have a high receptive drive. And one example I can give in the dental practice that really creates a lot of conflict is when you have a team of high structured, where it's the same routine, the same methodologies, we're using the same materials, we're using the same prophy polisher, we're doing all the same things. And then all of a sudden you get somebody coming in who has high receptive, who wants to try new equipment and try something new. Let's just even take Eden as an example. She's been working the teledentistry field for how many years? How many years, Eden? How long have you been with Mouthwatch?
2.5 years.
2.5. So she started kind of in that ground level time. Now, whether Brant realized it or not, hiring somebody with high receptive was the best thing he could have done, because this person is like, whoa, this is an interesting new thought. This is an interesting new technology that I'd love to try. This is awesome. So think about somebody who's high in structure. They may not be as receptive to something like teledentistry or, right?
That's a bit of an understatement.
Tell me something I don't know.
Right. Exactly. And so that's why, again, it's really important, even when you're looking at who you're dealing with in the dental practice. So a lot of times our doctors are very structured. They're not open-minded to new things, but our hygienists can be that way too. Or the office manager who's like, nope, I've used paper for 25 years and you guys are not going to put this in electronic mode. It's not going to happen. So it can be really challenging. This is a huge sticker I find in my kind of work that really can make or break teams. And so I really try to find, when we have such extreme on one side or the other, I mean, for both of you, then you're going to be more biased towards structure. That's not going to be the first natural thing that comes to your brain. But sometimes we do need to work on our biases. So you may work on trying to implement more structure into your life. But if you were in a highly structured environment, the both of you would be incredibly stressed. So look at what you're doing now, the freedom to schedule your podcast when you want to, and to do this type of profession is so enjoyable for you, I'm sure. And even doing teledentistry, being able to explain a new technology, a new theory in dentistry is probably very enjoyable, because that feeds on your high receptive drive. So knowing those things really show that you're in the right thing. And just to say the same point that I did at the beginning was, if you know your why, you'll never ask your what. Then you know what your what is. So this is kind of all that information is really heavy. I'm trying to give it to you obviously in a nutshell. So we're on a time crunch, of course, but I know that I did majority of the talking, and no doubt that you both have maybe some questions or thoughts you want to take this information to a different level, or Michelle, that you think the listeners would really benefit from. Is there anything else I can provide?
I actually am curious about, there was one thing I just made notes, and now I'm trying to remember what part of the conversation where I wrote this note, but my thought was these people who feel trapped in the op. My thought is that if they don't know their why, like you're saying, and they are feeling trapped in the op, maybe they're not, like, getting out of the op is probably not the answer to their problems. That was just kept coming back to me over and over again when you were talking, like, maybe they just need to find that practice that suits them better.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up, because that is something I feel really strongly about, is not everybody needs to leave the op. And that some people surely do need to leave the op, because they are created to do something else that fulfills them more. But as a whole, most hygienists are definitely in the field that serves their drives and serves their needs. They're not in the right environment. So, taking example again of that one hygienist who was working in a community health center, you're not fulfilled. So of course you're going to complain about, I should just leave the op. I should just leave the professional dental hygiene. I should just do this. Well, you're not in the right environment. It doesn't fulfill anything you're doing. So I think, again, if hygienists can find, they can take something as simple as an assessment like what we do, and, really take time to find what suits them the best. I sat next to a dental hygienist at breakfast yesterday at Indigo, and she had mentioned to me that she was working in a community health center, and she worked in pediatrics before, and just her passion was for peds. And she just talked about peds like somebody who was just full of passion for peds. So I said, well, in community health, are you taking all the pediatric patients then? No, I just take whomever. And I said, well, then why aren't you taking all the pediatric patients? I never thought of it. I said, well, it certainly floats your boat. It certainly lights your heart on fire. You're excited to talk about kids. That's all you've been talking to me about the whole time. Highly altruistic personality type, very, very much driven by serving. And so if peds are her thing, focus just on peds. So I think to say to any of the hygienists that are feeling discouraged within their clinical profession, and it might be scary, especially if you have certain traits that I mentioned before where you don't like change, it might be time to start looking outside the box a little bit. Do you need to further your education? Maybe you need to maybe you need to be an instructor, or maybe you like research. Maybe you literally do need to go down the road and join the new cosmetic practice that might suit your needs better that way. Or what is preventing you? So sometimes I'll hear people say like, well, you don't understand, Corey. I have to be in this environment because I'm the breadwinner for my family. But I'd love to serve in the community free clinic. Make a way, find a way. I don't have a lot of sympathy for people that say that, because I think for myself, I've always made a way. But then I have to say I'm highly resourceful in my personality traits. So for somebody who's not highly resourceful, for them to take a leap and say, I'm going to, take a financial change or a cut in pay or whatever, that can be very scary. But I do think finding that right environment, and especially with this career choice, dental hygiene is an amazing profession. And there's so many facets to it. People think it's all clinical, and we still need people to be clinical. And it's still an amazing profession clinically, but we have so many opportunities outside too to explore. Should you be driven that way? And I do see certain personality traits be driven to want to be outside the op. And those are a lot of our DIs. DIs are not happy hygienists unless they are in something that's challenging. I don't know if you guys find that to be true, but we need to be in something that's challenging.
I was just looking at the time wasters and how useful that section is, like how accurate it is.
Yes.
About where like time sucks that are decreasing my productivity, that they're just like laid out right there. I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And then it offers possible solutions. Like, I think there's so many things that are going to be so helpful for people in this assessment. But that one for me was like, oh my gosh, yes, because it offers solutions to those problems that I knew were there, but gives me ways to manage.
That's what we want to do when we give the assessment is to, number one, obviously I want people to read through it and say, yes, I strongly just, agree, or some things they say, oh, I don't know if that's totally me. And it is really interesting. If you have to do a self-analysis, like if you're really seriously getting real here, if you don't believe the results are accurate, have somebody really close to you take it. And it's amazing. I had my spouse like help me with mine one time because I was like, I am not like this. He's kind of like, yeah, you kind of are. And so you kind of are like, no, you really are, and it does. It hurts our ego when we see things that we might perceive to be negative. But when you look at those solutions, that's where the emotional intelligence starts to kick in, because then you can take it to another level and you don't use it as a crutch. Well, I'm a DI or I'm a high intellectual, so I have no instinctive. No, let's look at some solutions. Let's look at what, like you mentioned, the time wasters. Let's see what we can do to improve upon things that perhaps we want to improve upon. And it's such a game changer. I always tell people too, I'm like, why do you spend money on marriage counseling? Just take an assessment, have your spouse take an assessment, have your best friend take an assessment, whatever. When you know what's going on with somebody, it's super easy to understand them and to support them too. I had time with Dean this morning and I asked him some questions on some things I wanted him to support me on, because he's a high S. And you know what? Those high S's are really good at listening. They're very good at processing, and they're very good at seeing logical choices. The higher our I's, the more emotional we are. And that's sometimes you got to step back and have, address it to somebody who's less emotional than we are, right?
Corey, that's funny because my partner has not taken this assessment, but I would say he's a very high S.
Oh, yes.
He is just solid, like 100% solid. And I need that to keep me tethered.
Yes, absolutely. It's so awesome to be able to have that, because think about how much better we'd be, without it. I totally agree. When you're DIs like we are, we do need that S and that C. Even your C is at 8. I'd love to see what your partner's C is, because you've got to have some C. You got to have some C to keep you analytical a little bit there.
Yeah. Oh, he is so analytical. I would bet, Corey, he's the exact opposite of me. Yeah. I bet he is like a C.
Right.
I know that I'm going to make him take this assessment.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely have him take it. Definitely have him take it. It's a game changer, I tell you.
Any other little last tidbits or questions that you can think of, Edie, from your end?
I think that you just have to not be overwhelmed by the data.
The information.
Yeah. Here's my non-analytical brain.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's so much.
But Corey, you said that you don't always give the actual link where that goes through, because I'm thinking, because apparently my ego is pretty big according to this, to get to get this is like a blow to your ego. And I'm like, oh my God. But some of these things, when I go through it, the potential stressors or even the weaknesses, like it's so interesting because it makes complete sense. Like this whole, she may have difficulty when it comes time to apply the knowledge she has gained. Like I'm just like taking it in, and sometimes I don't know where to like stop learning and start applying.
Exactly. And so again, with both of you having that intellectual drive, it's so significant. So that means, what do you have on the opposite? You have that bias, so that when you're so like 96% and 93%, you want to be you just consume so much that sometimes what you would need to work on then is putting that into a practical setting. So the flip side then of instinctiveness is utilizing information for a specific purpose. So for both of you, I would encourage you, the next time that you're taking in information, let's use the assessments as an example. So instead of obsessing over the 60 pages that I sent you, it is a lot, take a little bit. Just take the disc first and look at that a little bit and then apply it to something in your everyday life. So I have a person on my team who's high intellectual, just like you guys are. And this is one thing she's working on this year, specifically with her bias of not having a lot of instinctive is, sure, you're going to go to all these seminars, you're going to do all these things, you're going to learn all these things, but then please tell me one thing a day that you've done practically with that information. And that's been a game changer for her. So, see, like an example today with either your partners, because it's obviously a weekend or whatever, or your children, or any interactions you have. Do you see just in the disc, not even with your driving forces, do you see how you showcased your high I personality, or how you blend it, like you maybe toned your D down as far as aggressiveness, like put it into practice, and then maybe even write it down, put it in a journal. That's what we have Jill doing. Put it in a journal, what you've done with that learning. So you've learned what DISC is today. How did you apply it today? And then tomorrow, I see that my altruism was really strong in this way. I'm going to do something intentional. So for me, I'm the opposite. I'm highly intentional. I have an 8 for altruism. I had to crack up though, because the other day I was driving and there was this man with a sign he needed money. And of course, when you're high altruism, if you have the money, you're going to just give it. That's what you guys would do. If you guys were in my car, you'd be like, give him some money, Corey.
We should stop.
Yeah. Stop. Give him some money. Don't let him not have his money. But so that's not natural for me. My first response is, well, he's probably a drug addict and he shouldn't have any money because he's just going to go get another fix. So that's bad. That's not bad, but that's my thought. But I'm trying so hard to work on that bias. So I pulled out $5 from my wallet. I was going to give him $5. The most hilarious part is here I'm going to try to work on my bias. And I'm on the driver's side and he's on the passenger side. So I couldn't even give him the money that I was going to give him. I'm like, I was trying to work on this. So, that's what I would say is, back to your intellectual, take what you learn and then put it into practice every day, something different. And that will really help you not consume so much knowledge without applying it. That's what's worked for the one person on our team.
That's amazing. So my next question then is, when can I start hiring you for personal coaching? How much is that per hour?
Right? I know.
I need some accountability on this.
So it's interesting you say that, because I would probably be a terrible coach, but I do think there is something to be said for friends being accountable to one another, and just kind of sharing in, hey, how are you doing with this? How are you doing with that? And that's definitely the three of us could do this, because I'm going to share with you guys my personality assessment, because I did not share that with people for a long time because I felt embarrassed. My D is at 96% and my I is at 87%. My S is at 8 and my C is at 38. So, and my commanding driver is at 93, and I am highly intentional, I'm highly objective, and I'm highly resourceful. So if you look at me and I'm a man, you're thinking, wow, that's a great business owner. You look at me as a woman and you're saying, wow, what a bitch. So it's really hard to,
which I hate.
Yeah.
I'm just going to break in and say that's crap. But anyway,
it is crap. But do you see how that's perceived though?
Yeah, absolutely. It absolutely is perceived that way.
Because clients will say, I want to see your assessment. And I kind of always be like, oh yeah, because I never want to talk about it. And now I'm like, you know what? No, you're hiring me. This is what you're getting. So if you don't want direct results, you don't want ROI bottom line. And if I'm not the right person for you, then maybe I'm not the right coach for you, or I'm not the right consultant for you. That's okay. And I have personally excused myself from clients before too, which probably isn't the best business practice. You want success, at least for my personality. Again, I want success. So if I'm working with a high S and, for me personally, that's an opposite personality trait, I can slow down, I can adapt. But if we're not getting results, in my mindset, like I don't feel rewarded then. So why should I take their money?
Right.
And they're probably not feeling rewarded because I'm going way too fast for them. So it's an interesting balance, but I think accountability is really good to have. And it is really good to say, like, what has worked for you in this way? And I will follow up with both of you. And I'm going to ask what knowledge you applied on Tuesday.
No, I love